Hey, what's up, guys? The Strong Boys 19 here, and apologize for my hairdo. I guess it doesn't look too bad. Anyways, this is going to be another 2015 review, and for this one, it is going to be on the brand new studio album from American thrash metal legends Slayer, entitled Repentless. Slayer is a band that is too popular to be missed out or not mentioned, because they are easily one of the most successful and most recognizable faces in the metal history. The band had been releasing a lot of albums that had been massively influential and successful, especially Rain in Blood, which is their obvious popularity landmark album, and they've released other albums I really do love, like South of Heaven and Seasons in the Abyss, which is another one of my major top near perfect Slayer albums. But then over the years, the band had been changing sound a little bit from thrash, which they still have, but at some parts they changed things up a little bit with tempo and direction of songs, and they've put up some groove type of elements on some tracks on later albums, and some lineup changes have been involved, mainly from Dave Lombardo's departures. So this is the first album to return Paul Bostaph, who had been with Slayer from the albums of Divine Intervention and God Hates Us All, and also Diabolus in Musica. So this is the first album also to feature Gary Holt to replace Jeff Hanneman, and in my opinion, Gary Holt is a very strong replacement to take Hanneman's spot. And this album has 12 tracks, and it runs at just close to 42 minutes. Nuclear Blast Records is the record label for this album, and Terry Date is the producer. So, what do I think of Repentless by Slayer? I think it's not one of Slayer's best albums. However, it is not a terrible album. I wouldn't really consider it as one of the best albums of the year. And Repentless had been one of these anticipated albums, since Slayer had been one of my favourite bands of all time. And this album has its moments of good and some bad. Let's start with some good first. The band are still very, very confident on bringing more original material, and their signature sound is still here, since this is their first album in 6 years, since World Painted Blood came out in 2009. And Slayer had been one of these bands that is just very, very obvious for bringing back their signature sound of some thrash that's just over the top fast and just so in your face. And there are some songs on here that are fast paced, and they are still very good sounding. However, not all of the album is fast, which I really don't have a problem with. They've been through that before on a couple of their albums, like God Hates Us All and some other albums. So a lot of the songs on this album are actually quite good, but there are some flaws on this album, that some of the tracks on here, some of the slow ones as well, can be a little bit repetitive to me, and I just hear similar things from each other, from this track and from this track, but I think the weakest part of this album is mainly the lyrical content. Now, the lyrics on this album are very, very different than the whole topics on violence and war and Satanism, and just a lot of brutal lyrical content. Some of the lyrics on this album are not bad at best, but at the same time, when I was looking at them, they seemed a little bit weak at some places, a bit generic. Some of the songs on here are still very good sounding. They do have some pretty good grooves, and also some of the guitar playing on this album is still very promising. But the album as a whole, I really don't think it's one of the best albums of the year, which is quite a shame from what I think, but it is what it is. So it is not a bad album, as I said before, but it's just one of these Slayer albums that is still a good release. And the guitar playing on this album is still very, very good. And there's been some really, really strong, impressive guitar solos. I'm also impressed with Gary Holt's playing as well, which is also very, very good as well. And the production of this album is also fantastic. The distorted guitar sound is perfect. The drums sounded great. And surprisingly, the bass guitar sound is as loud as the electric guitars, which I find quite rare sometimes from some production sounds from other Slayer albums. The bass sound on this album is like through the roof, and it is really good. And the vocals from Tom Araya on this album is it's just Tom Araya doing what he wants to do. He still has the same really high octave sounding voice. A lot of these yells and shouts and some over the top vocals, which he's really famous for because that's his signature vocal range. But it's just Tom Araya doing what he does when it comes to vocals. Some that are like loud and over the top, some of them are quite dark at some places. So overall, Repentless as an album, it is still quite a strong, capable album, but at the same time, I did mention some of the flaws in terms of, like some of the tracks I've mentioned that are quite a bit bland and a bit weak, and some lyricism as well. And mainly the album as a whole is still a good Slayer album. Well, I wouldn't really think of it as one of the best albums of the year. I don't know what you guys think. You can let me know in the comments below if you really like this album, and let me know if it is one of your favorite albums of the year. I wouldn't really place it in the top 5 albums of the year, but that's just what I think. So as for an album rating, I am going to give Repentless by Slayer a 7.5 out of 10. So that's just pretty much all I've got to say about this album. And let's just hope that some of the other bands from the Big Four would make more originality for future releases in the future. So thank you guys for watching, and I will keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.